Good morning. We're at the Iowa State Bar Association headquarters office. It's Wednesday, August 30th. With me is Dwight Dinkla, the Executive Director of the Bar, and Doug Strike, my partner and lobbyist with the Iowa Bar Association. Doug and I are going to break up the presentation this morning to cover items that you will be discussing at the upcoming September board meeting. The officers of the bar thought it would be helpful to you to have a preview of our presentation that would hopefully expedite the meeting a little bit and also provide you with some upfront information so that you're versed and ready to go when you discuss these issues. One of the first things I wanted to mention to you is that we've had a very active LawPAC presentation this summer and fall, even though it's not an election year. We have attended something like 51 different events, fundraisers, and presented LawPAC contributions to legislative candidates and legislators this fall. We've had two special elections. One of particular interest is John Jacobson, a lawyer from the Council Bluffs area, won a special election over in that area. And then just recently, Dr. Phil Miller won a special election down in the Fairfield area. Dr. Miller will replace Kurt Hansen, who died this past year. Doug will be discussing the issue of a special session with you and the budget situation, so I'll pass over on that. We have been communicating with the Department of Human Services on a rather interesting issue involving legal retainers and how the Department of Human Services views legal retainers when they are provided to attorneys, and basically an idea that they might be able to claw back some of that. Dwight Dinkla, myself, and Doug will be meeting with Jerry Foxhoven, the new director of the Department of Human Services, Friday morning to discuss that issue, and also a very interesting issue involving child support calculation and the department's program on that. Jerry Foxhoven, we're very fortunate, is a lawyer who's been active in the bar. You'll hear more about that. He's been very active and been a great bar member and is the first attorney to hold that position for quite a while. Also, Doug will be covering the affirmative legislative agenda that we're going to be putting together starting with the September board meeting. Doug has attended several of the section meetings, and there are proposals that you should be aware of. I wanted to update you on the workers' compensation issue that was discussed at the last board meeting. You may recall that you authorized Tom Wirt's section and Dwight and us to investigate whether or not there would be a chance of making a proposal on the work comp legislation that just passed dealing with the body of the whole situation and shoulders. Dwight had a meeting with Mike Ralston, the Executive Director of Association for Business and Industry. They have a special committee that reviewed the work comp statute, and it was unanimously agreed by ABI that they had no interest in pursuing a modification in the law this year. With that position being taken by ABI, it looks like it would be extremely difficult for us to pursue legislation. That does not mean that we cannot continue to have discussions with legislators. Doug and I have been meeting with legislative leadership to discuss this subject, and we'll continue to do so as long as the board wants us to advance that issue. There's a transfer on death issue that's been around, percolating for quite a while. Doug will talk to you about that. We've had a lot of discussion between our probate section, real estate section, and key state legislators. One lawyer legislator in particular who has an interest in that matter. With that, I think we'll turn it over to Doug. This issue of special session is very important as it relates to the judicial branch budget. We just yesterday met with David Boyd, who is retiring this year, in his the new successor to his position, on what we're going to be looking at in terms of potential budget cuts, even further budget cuts with the judicial branch and what that might be. So thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you at the September board meeting.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks for setting up things with your introductory comments on this. As Jim said, they wanted me to touch on some of the budget information that's going to be included in your packet and the impact that budget situation is going to have on the state. Included in your packet are some documents, and I believe they're going to put them up on the screen for you to see. One of them is a Excel spreadsheet we put together to help track what's really gone on with the budget. When I say REC through this little bit of the presentation, I'm referring to the Revenue Estimating Conference, and if I say LSA, that is the Legislative Services Agency. They are entities that help us put the budget together at the state level and define how many dollars are coming in and how many dollars to expect in putting the budget together. We're currently in the fiscal year 18. That began on July 1 of 17, and fiscal year 17 ended on June 30th of this year. So when I refer to FY17, that is prior to July 1, and FY18 is after July 1. What we're dealing with in the state budget right now is that FY17 had significant reductions that hit 3 different times. Back in December, the REC reduced the revenue projections $118 million, and the state passed a deappropriation to accommodate that. Part of that deappropriation included a $3 million reduction in the existing FY17 appropriation for the judicial branch. That $3 million appropriation ended up being carried forward for the FY18 appropriation. So we were flat funded between 17 and 18, but that flat funding was based upon a $3 million reduction from where we were for FY16. So over 3 fiscal years, the net result has been the judicial branch has lost $3 million and has received no additional money despite the increases in operating costs that they've had. The March REC came in for FY17 and required another reduction. This reduction was $131 million. The legislature chose to address that by taking money from the rainy day and economic emergency funds. That totaled up to $249 million in shortfall. Come the first part of July, the Legislative Services Agency that was tracking revenues coming in stated that there would be between a $65 and $110 million additional shortfall for FY17. When you read things in the newspaper talking about the need for a special session, that is what's driving it. A special session would be necessary if the governor has to transfer more than $50 million from the rainy day fund to balance their accounts. The governor could do an across-the-board cut, as was done in 2010, without calling the legislature back, but the governor has publicly stated multiple times that she will not be doing an across-the-board cut. As of the taping of this, we believe there will not be a need for a special session to appropriate monies to 17. However, there may be a special session called to deappropriate dollars for 18 because of the reduction in revenues that will be expected in that year. Right now, that's expected to be between $65 and $100 million in reduction for FY18. As we look forward to FY19, which is the budget that will be put together by the legislature when they convene in January, we are not looking at a whole lot of additional new revenue because a majority of new revenue, assuming growth projections are hit, will be consumed with payments that are mandated by the Iowa Code, repaying the monies that had been borrowed from the rainy day fund. When you couple that with growth in footprint in Medicaid and some modest increases in K-12 education spending, you're looking at between $30 and $50 million in new money to be spread around a $7.5 billion state budget. As you'll see on your outline, this is going to have an impact on the judicial branch. We're already having reports from ISBA members about delays in trial settings. I know Jim Carney has had one trial that required a delay out into July of next year, almost a full year out from when he had his date set. Of course, the court will remind everyone that criminal law and domestic matters take precedence over other matters, and that is pushing out even further our trial dates to get things accomplished. The court is going to maintain at least 120 vacancies, and they also plan on not filling judicial vacancies unless it's absolutely necessary until they come upon the one-year statutory requirement to fill those positions. You're going to be presented in your packet a list of affirmative legislative pieces or proposals from the various sections. We right now believe there will be 8 different affirmative legislative pieces brought forth by probate, a few from family law, and 1 piece from business law. We have not heard about any new pieces from real estate. However, they have that section has 3 pieces of legislation from last legislative session that will carry forward. Your packet will have a lot of detail on those, and we look forward to discussing those proposals with the entire Board of Governors to determine whether or not they rise to the level of being included in our affirmative agenda for the 2018 legislative session. Jim asked that I touch on the transfer on death deeds issue. Currently, the Bar Association has at least 2 sections who are in conflict on transfer on death deeds. That's the real estate and the probate sections. Why we're bringing this up again to the Board of Governors is that we have seen for the last 3 legislative sessions legislation being offered by non-lawyer legislators, and we're expecting one now from a lawyer legislator that addresses legalizing and implementing transfer on death deeds in Iowa. If we continue with the position that we're in right now on behalf of the Bar Association, which is undecided because we have 2 sections in conflict, that will make it difficult for us to have individuals involved in perfecting those bills, and we wanted to bring this to the Board of Governors' attention so that, 1, you know or are reminded that the issue is there, and 2, that we have an idea on how the Board of Governors want us to address this issue when it is inevitably brought up during the 2018 legislative session.